Hey friend, I have a quick message for you before today's episode. Let me ask you, are you having a hard time getting your team motivated? Do they feel disengaged? And of course, as you know, you are not alone. There's many people like you facing the same problems every day. What if I told you that you can motivate your team without even trying? Well, Karen, the guest on this episode, will host an online workshop for you that tackles engagement without focusing on motivation. You can see the details at bit.ly/Karin with a K, that's KARIN_SMTP. And the link is also on the show notes. Now, I can already hear you say, what do you mean without focusing on motivation? That's a great question. One of the main reasons Agile fails or doesn't achieve the outcomes we want is because we're trying to install Agile like if it were an app on top of an outdated operating system. It's like trying to install a 3D game on top of Windows 95. The operating system on which we are trying to install Agile is the underlying management and leadership paradigm that the associated mindset that we are really blind to, that even I and maybe you are blind to. In this workshop, Karin explores a different leadership mindset and gives us the tools and exercises that will help us adopt this new operating system of sorts and overcome the need to motivate, which is really an old leadership paradigm focus, by replacing that need with a new approach, self-organization as it was meant to be. For more on that, visit bit.ly/Karin_SMTP. The link is also on the show notes. So if your vision is to develop a team or organization with highly motivated, self-driven, and responsible team members, we look forward to seeing you in this workshop and introducing a way of seeing leadership that will help you develop successful teams. You can get the details at bit.ly/Karin_SMTP. That was the announcement. Now on to the episode. Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. On Fridays, we talk about the product owner role in Scrum. We talk about patterns and anti-patterns that relate to ours and the team's collaboration with the product owner. And we've also put together a course to help you navigate that relationship. There's 18 modules, nearly 8 hours of tools, techniques, videos, handouts, presentations you can use to help you and your team work better with your product owner. The course is available at bit.ly/coachyourPO. All lowercase, all one word. That's bit.ly/coachyourPO. And now, on to the show, the Product Owner Show. Hello everybody, welcome to our TGIF, the Friday and Product Owner episode. This week with Ben Maynard. Hi Ben, welcome back.
Hello there, lovely to be here again.
It's good to have you, and we talk about product owners today, and knowing that you're a fan of Les and the work that Bas Bode and Craig Larman did with their books on scaling Scrum, I'm actually quite interested to hear your thoughts on the product owner role, since it is one of the crucial roles in Scrum and also in the framework that Bas and Craig put together, the large-scale Scrum framework. So first, let's dive into what might be a bad example. So let's work through what might have been possibly the worst product owner anti-pattern you've seen in your career, Ben.
Well, I can just talk about me. It's fine. That's an easy one. One thing I will say, just to look back, I feel that the product owner role is critical, but I would argue and say, what role in Scrum isn't critical if you're actually using Scrum. And I think that part of the problem, and if I talk about bad PO anti-patterns, is when people don't really understand Scrum, or it's not being used in the way it was intended within an organization. So when I look at my previous experiences, it's the belief that a product owner should be involved in the clarification of the product backlog items and getting stuck in there, acting as a worst case, someone, as I think I mentioned at the top of the week, who just kind of creates a backlog and hands it over to people, or even at times just kind of being that middle person. Maybe the backlog is growing as it goes, but you've got a product owner who is talking to the users, talking to the customer, writing that down, going back, showing the team, and then being the person that the team talks to get the clarification. Because I feel like, I think for many people, and I'll be controversial on this, but they feel that perhaps implicitly feel that Scrum is there to supersede the Agile principles. And I often see people say, "Oh, we're Agile, we're using Scrum, we've got product owners for each team," and the product owners are doing the analysis effectively. They're acting like a traditional business analyst,
which is not what the product owner should be, by the way. So, product owner is definitely not the requirements manager.
They're absolutely not, and I think this is why I like less, because we have one product owner per product, and in Less Huge we have area product owners as well, but they serve many teams. They are too busy to be involved in all the clarification, because the Agile principle says that business people and developers should work together on a daily basis. This isn't something that I see as it should be a decision to avoid that shouldn't be taken lightly, and the product owner isn't the person who's supposed to sit in between the teams and the users and stop those relationships from being built. So I think that the product owner antipattern is being that requirements manager, effectively acting as in the capacity of an analyst, and worst of all, I think worst of all from my situation, from my perspective, is hindering, or in fact kind of stopping it dead in its tracks, the ability for a team to actually grow relationships with the people that are receiving or paying for the software. And if the teams aren't learning about the customers and users' needs directly from them, aren't building relationships, or isn't building empathy, then it hinders a team's ability to make any decisions about any small decisions about what's happening if they get stuck. It means that the Scrum Master, you have many more impediments. It means that the product owner is spending all of their time working in a document-centric fashion. And the role of product owner, I don't believe, should be about that. It should be about building relationships, setting clear direction, and getting out of the way so that the customer can lead the development.
One of the things that you mentioned, like this breaking of the relationship between team and the people who use and pay for the software, so either users or customers, it reminds me that there's this implicit acceptance, even in the Agile community, that somehow teams are there to develop the software, not to deliver value. And what I mean by deliver value, I mean, you can't actually create something of value, a tool, right? Or the expression of a process, which very often is the case when we build software. You can't build that tool or that expression of a process for someone else if you can't even talk to them.
No, I mean, I think, and I love the sweeping statement, and I'm inclined to provide them at some point, and I will caveat those whenever I can remember. There are some situations where things are nice and clear and obvious, and we are very, very comfortable with the problem we're trying to solve, the needs of the users, and we're very, very comfortable with and then well understanding of how we're going to go about doing it, technical solution. And in those situations, we can spec it out. We don't have to get the customers and users talking to each other. But I think those situations in our, in the world we live in, are increasingly small in number. And what we are so dependent upon is feedback to understand the reality, because we are unsure of the needs and the problems. And without the teams being seen as, the people who are responsible for creating solutions that are of value, and without users and customers understanding that their role is to really articulate the behavior changes that they are seeking and work with a team to come up with really interesting technical solutions that enable those behavior changes, then we're missing a trick. And the product owner is absolutely key in ensuring that we don't miss our opportunities within that context.
Absolutely. And now, of course, we talk about the different product owner, a product owner that is hopefully the opposite of what we just discussed. So perhaps the best product owner you've ever worked with and how they worked. Ben, share that with us.
For me, it was, you mentioned less large-scale Scrum. And I think for me, the thing that hit me in the face when I really began to learning about less was the 5 relationships of a product owner, and the most I would say the most successful and probably happiest product owner that I worked with really was fundamentally focused on building these 5 relationships, which was their relationship with the higher management, it was their relationship with the team, it was their relationship with the customers and users, it was their relationship with the Scrum Master, and last, but for me, like of utmost importance, is focusing on building a relationship between the users and the customers and the team. Like from a product owner perspective and from a less perspective, you see it's absolutely fundamental that the product owner bears responsibility for building and nurturing those relationships between the team and the users. Because if they don't, they will end up spending all of their time stuck in the middle, or you will end up with extra roles being created to deal with that outside of the team.
Yeah, especially extra roles that we are all familiar with.
Yes, like I think roles to fix problems is a horrific organizational antipattern that once you start going on that following that systemic behavior, your number of roles will not diminish. You will have fewer roles until you begin to run out of money, or you slow down so much that you have to pay one of the highly priced consultant to come in and tell you something which is seemingly abundantly obvious once they've told you. So I think that good POs focus on relationships, and when I think of the product owner I've got in mind, one of the greatest things I ever saw them do was at the very beginning of their tenure as product owner, they spent a lot of time learning about impact mapping. They spent a lot of time working with the business and with the business, the customers, the users, and the team to develop a skeleton impact map. Really believed in it, really learnt about it, got all of the right people in a room together, and facilitated a wonderful relationship building exercise of creating an impact map for the whole delivery, which focused on the difference that the difference they were looking to make to the bottom line, how much money in this instance they were going to be getting back from a large European regulator, which was a non-trivial. I mean, we're talking hundreds of millions of euros they were looking to effectively get back because of this enhanced reporting they were able to do. There was a strong focus from the people in the room on the behavior changes that the users of the report, the people who were facing up to the regulators, what they needed to do differently, how they needed to behave differently. And then lastly, talking with the teams getting involved, talking about the solution, but only once they had really understood what the behavioral changes were and how they were going to affect the bottom line. And once they knew all of that and they could talk to the users, it just led to this wonderful, increasingly strong relationship that was being built that led to, a lot of the analytics UI. One analytics UI developer in particular, just spending one day a week sitting down with the traders, actually sitting down with them doing desk-based development. It was a wonderful situation and something which everyone benefited from, and it wouldn't have been possible unless that product owner had really embraced this idea of building relationships and setting the right direction based upon behavior changes, not on scope, not on solution, but on the human aspect.
Absolutely. And you just gave a great example. I remember a similar story like that. That idea of getting the team, in this case, you talked about a UX designer, to go and spend time with the people who will use the product, because there's so many surprises we get from exposing ourselves to reality, right? Even in those cases, in those few cases where everything is known up front, everything can be spec'd up front, when you actually show it to people, when you actually see people interacting with it, it will surprise you. And of course, it will give you insights and ideas on how to improve what you just created.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it's critical. It's an agile, probably one of the hardest agile principles to live by. Business people and developers work together on a daily basis. But it's hugely transformative. It's hugely transformative, and I'm not saying it's easy. But I'm saying it's something worth optimizing for, and good product owners absolutely should strive for that. Just to add one quick thing to that. At the same time, I'm hugely empathetic for people who are recruited as product owners with no product to own, whose roles are that of analysts, and I feel I empathise with them. It's a really tough situation to be in. And somebody did say to me recently, they said, "Look, yeah, I'm a product owner, but to be honest with you, Ben, I haven't got a product to own."
Yeah, I remember, I mean, just to be clear, that role, the role of just keeping the backlog tidy and understandable and, sized properly and so on, which cannot be done alone, but it's a work that needs to be done. I remember way back when we started Agile adoption, one of the teams I was working with, they had a role, literally they had this name in the role, the product backlog secretary, and it was a loving name. It was in no way a criticism, but it was, and they took it up themselves. The team took up that role themselves. We didn't hire anyone. They took that responsibility because they understood that there's a lot of value in keeping the backlog crisp, understandable, small chunked, and prioritized all the time. And our business product owner at that time just wasn't able to do that work. So the team said, hey, if you can't do it, we'll do it. You'll sit in with us. We'll create the stories, but we need to make sure that works. And you just highlighted actually by that example you shared, how sometimes we forget that actually the product owner role ends up being a shared role among multiple people in the team and, of course, the product owner in name also.
And I mean, from a less perspective, I think that, like, strictly, we wouldn't say that it's shared, but I'm not disagreeing with Vasco, but I think there is definitely something here. But the responsibilities, the kind of things that people believe a product owner should be doing, right, because of a lack of really understanding about the true, like, what product ownership is, absolutely is shared. Absolutely, and everyone has responsibility in that. I'm a staunch, firm believer that your product backlog is your tactics. And it should just contain on it the stuff which the team are understanding, or the stuff the team are delivering, or teams are delivering. There isn't a roadmap. It isn't a strategic tool. And from my experience, as soon as it starts being used as that, the backlog inflates humongously, and the team have less and less to do with the stuff that's being put on it.
Absolutely. And it's actually a dangerous thing to use the backlog as the all-containing, all-encompassing single document for everything we do, because we get lost in the details. I very often tell the teams that I work with, look, it's okay if you want to put stuff into the backlog, but it's not really useful to have more than, say, 1 to 2, maybe 3 sprints on it, because we need to have the longer-term view represented even visually in some other form, like a story map and an impact map.
Yes, exactly, because every backlog item you put on there, which is kind of over a certain horizon, is an investment that you're just leaving to rot, leaving to diminish. Like my friend, a good friend of mine always says, requirements are like milk.
Oh yeah.
If you leave them for too long, it'll go off.
Absolutely.
So you think we've got 10 teams, say 8 teams working on one backlog, they will create 2 extra items per sprint, which they're not going to look at. That soon mounts up to a massive investment and a huge amount of work in progress in your backlog. And the backlog becomes unmanaged, unmaintainable. It becomes a mess, and no teams want to touch it. So it's a very difficult balance to strike. But I'm with you all the way. 2 or 3 sprints ahead. Anything more than that, then it belongs somewhere else, because we're talking beyond the immediate.
The horizon, exactly.
And sure, there needs to be strategy and vision, absolutely. But using a product backlog for it often just leads to more pain than it does benefit.
Ben, we're getting close to the end. Unfortunately, this conversation could go on for a long time. But before we do share with us, where can we find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Sure thing. So you can always find me on LinkedIn. You can find me by looking for Ben Maynard. You will not lose me there. My website, or my company name, is Sheave. We have been doing a lot of work with reasonably large organisations, looking at kind of organisational redesign, and also the application of empirical process control at an organisational level. So my website is sheave.co.uk. You can find out more information about me there. I've got some training courses coming up as well in large-scale Scrum remote training courses, and there'll be some videos popping up on LinkedIn soon as well around some of the kind of core less principles and ideas. So if anybody wants to contact me, find me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to contact me, or head over to my website and see some of the stuff that I've been up to.
Absolutely. We'll put all the links you mentioned on the show notes for people to easily find you and get in touch. So once again, Ben, thank you very much for your generosity with your time and your knowledge.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, Vasco.
one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast is over. But there's a lot more we have to share. We have developed our own membership site where you find a community of active and engaged Scrum Masters. In this site, you get access to exclusive content and get to interact with us, your podcast hosts, as well as the best Scrum Masters in the world. Join us at scrummastertoolbox.com/podcast and keep this podcast free of advertising. See you next week for one more week full of Scrum Master tips and tricks. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.